On this episode of AV Week, 15 vulnerabilities in wireless presentation systems where AI and AV can work together. And Zoom gets another government certification. All that and more. Next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 402, recorded Friday, May 10th, 2019. This show is redacted.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Peerless AV, driving technology through innovation.
And by Buy-In. And by Daylight, the leading producer of high-quality projection screens worldwide.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered this week, first and foremost, the lovely Miss Dawn Mead. You know her as AV Dawn. Welcome, ma'am.
Thanks so much for having me, Tim.
Absolutely. Also with us, it's been a long week and I can't talk. Also with us, Peter Herr from Shure. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
All right, thank you. And last but not least, Chris Backus, our buddy from Harman by Samsung. Welcome, sir.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get started with the news that we're going to cover, real quickly, I didn't want to necessarily gloss over this. Pretty significant merger, acquisition, combination deal happened Thursday morning. We're recording this Friday, May 10th. This happened Thursday, the morning, at least for us here in the Central Time Zone. Thursday, May 9th. Snap AV and Control4 are merging in a $680 million deal. The way it's worded, they're calling it a merger. Snap AV, though, is the one putting up all the money and paying the stockholders of Control4. So my reading of that is it's more of a purchase, but semantics and tomato. Matt Scott on Resi Week will actually be covering this in great detail come Monday. He's got a number of integrators and actually a distributor of Snap AV coming on. So stay tuned to that. But yes, big deal in primarily the residential market. So our first story, though, comes to us from the website called Security Week. Security researchers Tenable discovered 15 vulnerabilities in 8 wireless presentation systems. Don't go running and seeing which one you have, because you probably know which one you have. So listen up. Crestron Air Media AM100. That's important, the AM100 part, and we'll tell you why in a second. The Sharp PN series, Optima WPS Pro, Black Box, InFocus, Extron ShareLink, and Barco We present. Those were the 8 wireless presentation systems. In their investigation, Tenable discovered Barco was the OEM manufacturer for the rest. Barco and Extron both have released patches for the exploits. Crestron, in the time that the Tenable started talking, has discontinued the AM100. They have now released the AM200, AM300 that do not use Barco's code base. Tenable contacted each company in January of this year, and actually on the link that we're going to share and put on the website on this page, this episode's website, it will detail from January 15th all the way through the end of May of 2019, Tenable's communication with each manufacturer and how each one of those went. Read a piece here from Crestron's statement on the AM100 vulnerabilities. Quote unquote, please note the following vulnerabilities only affect the AM100 and the AM101 devices. All other second generation AM Air Media devices are not affected. Dawn, I'm going to start with you on this. As an end user and a former integrator, what should the protocol be when an exploit is known? Who should know and when?
Well, wearing my integrator hat, I was sort of a proponent of paying more attention to security things, even when I was an integrator, trying to get integrators educated about the idea of cybersecurity and being aware of vulnerabilities. And back then, I encouraged manufacturers, hey, speak up. Let us integrators know that there's a problem or potential problem with your product. it doesn't mean we're going to stop selling it or using it. It just means we need to be aware to close the loopholes, to change the passwords, which we should be doing anyway, to notify the customer to not use it in certain installations and in others. So I think that there is some definite culpability on the part of the manufacturer to let the integrators know. But if you're an integrator and you're watching this, find out about these things, pay attention to these things, educate your staff about these things, and then talk to your customers. I took a great class actually at an AMX event some years ago with Paul Zealy, who is scarily genius, but also very good on these topics. And, he was talking about ports and protocol documents. And granted, this is 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't know what that was as an integrator. And now I know that's vital. You need your ports and protocols documents. You need your understanding of where your devices are touching the internet, are touching the outside world, so you know what to guard and what to protect. And now that I'm an end user, and particularly in the vertical that I am in for company name redacted, being aware of these vulnerabilities is more important than ever. If I find out that there's a product that has a potential vulnerability, I am definitely not going to be using that in my designs here for this company because of the security concerns. Even with products that don't have known vulnerabilities, at this company, they go through a multi-month vetting process with our InfoSec team and our cybersecurity guys before we can even demo them in our systems, let alone install them across the enterprise. So it's hugely important. If you are an integrator, pay attention to this stuff. Take classes at the upcoming InfoComm show on this stuff, because your end users are more and more concerned with and aware of such vulnerabilities as these, and we really want solutions. And manufacturers, guys, love you guys, but please communicate. Let us know so that we can prepare. Like I said, it doesn't mean we're never going to use a Barco or a Crestron or a whomever product again. It just means that we need to be prepared to mitigate the risk that using some of these products might bring to our enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Backus, I'm going to pick on you. Chris comes to us from, I said he works for Harman. Before that, in that vein, it also comes to us from AMX. AMX has had a couple issues over the years with some of those vulnerabilities being posted on technology sites. And that's why I asked the question is who should know and when? To Don's point, let the integrators know and let them help you guys fix it. But also, how should you communicate that and when you find issues?
Sure. As a manufacturer of devices that live on a network, that's kind of the norm, right? Going forward, we should expect that there will be people testing the hardware and finding vulnerabilities, right? That's, to Don's point, you can't just block everything that, raises a flag on a particular site. There's a degree of severity in that. And so that's what being educated about security vulnerabilities does for you, is at least understand the spectrum of what that risk potential is. And so as a manufacturer, we're always going to be at risk for those. I think the professional testers that are out there for security experts are, as you saw in this article, engaging people early ahead of any type of public release and announce in an attempt to be able to have a story that also comes along with a fix, right? And so in this case, as you saw, several of the manufacturers that were affected by this had the ability to go ahead and publish a fix ahead of the release, so that customers were informed and then also had a solution to go to. And so for a manufacturer, it mostly comes down to obviously your upfront testing, but things are going to happen and things will be uncovered by professional testers and non-professional testers as well. But once that gets raised to you, it's how you handle that. And do you have a security section on your website or something to that effect that says, look, this is our notice. You see this on Cisco all the time, right? As far as the ability to go out and say, this is what was observed, this is what was documented.
Microsoft, Apple, anybody that has any sort of software or hardware that touches the network does this.
Correct. Our industry has been a little bit slow to adopt to that, right? And you have an ongoing theme with, do I have firmware updates or do I have security patches and things of that nature? And as an industry and as a manufacturer, I know that that's something that we can get better at as far as how we respond to security incidents. It's not an if they'll happen, it's a when they'll happen type deal. And so, as we progress and mature in that particular phase of our business, I think that you'll see that manufacturers are paying a lot of attention to it, and they're doing a lot of things to potentially secure a device. One of the things that was a takeaway for me in this was you have the intended use case of the product, which is local area network, people sharing content from a mobile device up on screen, right? But the article pointed out how Shodan pointed out to hundreds of endpoints that were publicly exposed to the network. Now, I'm sure that wasn't part of the use case, right? That wasn't really part of the design, but the reality is they're public facing in some cases. The question should be, why is it public facing? But as a manufacturer, we have to recognize that if it connects to the network, we have to assume the worst, that it could be a publicly facing device. And are we providing the technical functions and options within the software to allow you to lock that product down? And so I think the takeaway, for me at least, from where I sit, is to make sure that we're providing a number of features from a network security standpoint that enable the customer to do what they need to with the product, so that if they are going to leave it out publicly facing, it can at least be locked down so that they would mitigate the risk for some of the disturbances that this article was pointing out.
Yeah. And real quickly, Chris mentioned this. My thing on my drumbeat is to manufacturers. Tell me, for real, is your quote unquote firmware update really a security patch? I have actually gotten pushback on some manufacturers, people much smarter than I am, explaining to me that in certain instances, the security update has to be firmware because of the type of circuitry it's updating. So I'm pulling back a little bit on it. I still want some more visibility and more transparency into what it is. But my argument has been, if I tell here in St. Louis, we have Scott Air Force Base. If I tell Scott Air Force Base, hey, I have a firmware update that, is going to give you some new functionality, you're not going to get in there for 2 or 3 months. If I tell them I have a security update, I'll get in, as soon as I can drive over there. So that's kind of been my thinking, but I have gotten a little bit of pushback, and I understand kind of where they're coming from in the terminology. So, Peter, I'm going to take a slight left turn here with you, and that's talking about OEMs for a second. And Chris, you can jump in unless you want, and Dawn, you can too, obviously. But this seems to be one manufacturer, and I'm not beating up on Barco. Chris said it's not a question of if somebody is going to break into your system, it's when. But they were the main manufacturer, the OEM manufacturer for this product, which seemed to have, kind of spread like dandelion flower seeds to other products. In this instance, or maybe in other instances, who in this chain should be kind of the main person responsible for the communication? I'm not going to say legal responsible or whatever. I'm not that kind of person, but who should be the one communicating that? Should it be Barco, or should it be the original OEM, or like Tenable did here? They contacted everybody that they kind of figured out and saw was affected.
I mean, I think honestly, there's a little bit of responsibility on the communication front from everyone involved. Honestly, I don't know that, because I feel like if it's not communicated, at least from multiple sides of it, there's going to be more finger pointing than resolution, and it's probably not going to be something that's going to end well, either for the OEM or the partner. So I can't tell you enough about how much chatter there is around my organization around security in general, and where things are going with this. We know that there's some serious concerns. We know that we need to make sure that we're on top of every release. You mentioned about firmware. We definitely have a process by which we issue firmware updates that are termed critical. We don't label them as security, but they are noted as such to make sure that people get them out there rather than just a feature update. Because a feature update is going to take, that's going to be like, well, that's great, I want that feature. But some of those more higher stringent security side of customers of ours are going to want to make sure that it meets all their requirements before they just go ahead and install it. So I think I think everyone shares a portion of that responsibility, to be sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tim, another point on that is the security researcher doesn't necessarily know about the OEM arrangement, right? And so there has to be a back and forth dialogue between all parties.
Right.
So that information could come into any one of those particular, participating manufacturers, who then have to upchannel through their support agreements. Anytime someone's going to OEM a product, there's usually a number of different agreements that go into that arrangement. One of those is the support and care plan. And so, whenever you get a tier 1 tech support question, you hopefully can answer that. But when it's a little bit higher, you're going to have to take that, send in an RFI to the actual OEM and get them to fix it. And there's turnaround times, SLAs for that kind of stuff. But part of that is the security conversation. So anyone that's participating has to upchannel any type of security threat or notification up to the OEM partner, so they can go ahead and formulate a resolution and then send it out to all impacted parties.
Very good. Next story here actually comes to us from AV Technology and our good friend Marco Dawahi. Marco dives into using AI, artificial intelligence, in the classroom and on campus, including video analytics, class capture, security, personalized learning, which is very interesting. We'll put a link on it on this show's page, and accessibility. Peter, I'm going to start with you on this. Where should we expect AI in the AV space? Where should we expect kind of the artificial intelligence? Marco makes a good point for classroom and higher education technology. But there have also been rumblings of people using it for acoustic design and acoustic spaces, for other design systems and stuff like that. So where do we see AI happening in the world of AV?
Yeah, that article is fascinating. I think there's a number of opportunities. I think the education space seems pretty logical from a standpoint of you're largely dealing with probably that, especially from the generation, I guess, that are in school, that are in education, are probably very used to that, engaging with that type of technology on a regular basis. But in the AV space, it's something that I feel like, especially for particularly in like audio, I think audio is by and large invisible, and being able to kind of analyze stuff visually from a standpoint of knowing where sound is going to be captured and where it's not going to be, for instance, in a conference space or in an education space, being able to kind of know how the physics involved of a given, is the room ambient, is the room dead, is the room going to give you certain types of reflections off of certain surfaces, all that could be baked into something that a tool that would allow you to design a room for a particular purpose probably a lot quicker than you can now, without really maybe not even hearing it. With AI, I think that's something that it's something that has been talked about a lot within the walls of our organization, and we're looking at new ways every day to kind of make the integrator, make the deployment folks their jobs easier through employing such technology to get installations done quicker. So it's definitely I think it's we're on the precipice of something that's pretty exciting.
Chris, I've got a question. Where do you see AI in AV?
Well, I thought of a number of different applications, and it's still obviously emerging, but some of the things that we're starting to see are real-time language translations for video conferencing. And so that's a little bit of an improvement compared to maybe just regular straight language translation. It's more contextual, and so it's going beyond just rote word for word. But also things I see on the control side as we deploy rooms, more advanced user testing in terms of how many scenarios can we run against a room and possibly break it. Design verification, I think, could be interesting, especially with regulatory code compliance. I'm not sure where we're at from a BIM perspective and from a CAD perspective, but just this idea that there's volumes of data, of regulations that my design should comply with, I think it's quite interesting that we could potentially see some AI enhancements there as well.
Dawn, AI is still kind of evolving, and it probably, not to be silly, and this is not meant to be flip, it probably always will be, because it's artificial intelligence, and we're evolving. And if it does its job, it will also evolve. But I would argue that we're kind of on the first steps of it, especially in the world of AV. So, what are some of the dangers, the pitfalls of jumping into a technology like AI too quickly?
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, there's of course the obvious joke. Do you want Skynet? Because that's how you get Skynet, or HAL. I think the world of cinematic dystopia has given us plenty of examples of how AI can go horribly, horribly wrong. I mean, realistically speaking, I think part of from both the integration front and the end user front, part of the risk of jumping into the technology too early, and it's true of AI as it is of any technology, is it's not quite ready for prime time, possibly, depending on the use case. And when that happens and you invest heavily in a technology that isn't quite there yet, there's going to be some execs burned. There's going to be some money people burned. There's going to be some people saying, why did we waste where's the return on investment that we were promised? And we wasted all this money on this thing that doesn't work. And I can't tell you when I was an integrator how often I would hear from someone, well, we tried that in the past and it doesn't work. And so why are we going to waste more money on it? Technology has evolved a long time since whatever burned you back then. But once some folks get that in their head, they're not going to want to pursue it. So if you jump into this a little too soon, I could see some people getting burned, getting cynical, not believing the hype, and in a lot of cases, it is hype at the moment. Just as, 4K now, 2019, we're seeing wide adoption of 4K. How long ago was it that Infocom was all about 4K and it's the next great thing and everybody needs to spend all their money on 4K TVs and all you could watch was that single Oz movie that they recorded in 4K? So
now 4K is passe and 8K is the next thing.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Everybody jumps on these bleeding edge bandwagons. And don't get me wrong, I love hot new tech. It's that's why I'm in this industry. I like to play with the new toys. But it's a case of when you're looking at things from an enterprise perspective, for corporations, for even integrators, for that matter, staking your reputation on, I'm going to be a proponent of this new technology, you need to be aware that there are pitfalls by adopting too early, that you could go down with the ship. And so you want to be, I had a boss one time tell me, we want to be leading edge, but we don't want to be bleeding edge. Let somebody else take the risk of being the bleeding edge guy that could hemorrhage out. And you take the leading edge. Don't be the last guy adopting. Don't be so risk averse that you miss the boat entirely. But don't push the envelope so quickly. And I think with AI, if you get into it too quickly before there's a proven use case and a proven track record, at least in certain uses, you could run that risk. Now, personally, I think the idea, what Chris and Peter said about using it for audio verification and for helping design, speaking as someone fairly new as a designer professionally, I love that idea, especially for folks that happen to be, big V, little a AV professionals, being able to just input all of those audio requirements and all of those standards and help, there's always an element of art involved, but if I could get that designed to the spec perfectly with the assistance of an AI and then go in there and sweeten it with the ear the way, you're supposed to, that would save so much time and energy. So I see it as ultimately a good thing, but just, too soon, sometimes too soon.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, our last story here comes to us from Globe e-Newswire. Zoom, which is the platform we are using today, Zoom has been approved under the U.S. Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, also known as FedRAMP, and that's what I'll use. The FedRAMP designation means government agencies can use Zoom for government meetings as well as make use of API integrations, meaning that Zoom, not this instance, but the Zoom for government, can be used for secure communications. Chris, I want to start with you on this. How important are government designations and certifications like this for companies?
Well, I think they're highly important, and it's a delicate balance as a manufacturer, the amount of time and effort that you put into achieving that certification versus the return on that investment you think you're going to get. It's often a barrier to entry, which can be good if you're the first one across that hurdle. Your competitors are probably trying, but they're not there yet. Or if I have a competitor that has crossed that hurdle and I'm not in the conversation because I don't have a specific certification to reside on a government network, for instance, I might be precluded from that contract and be spec locked out. So it's pretty important as a manufacturer to be a part of that. Now, in this case, you said secured communications. This is actually for unclassified communications. The very end of that, they mentioned a DISA level 5 that they're working on, but even that is still the highest level of unclassified communications.
That's where I got confused. I thought that the 5 was the classified one. Okay.
No, if you look that up, 6 starts to get into that, but essentially 5 and below are all unclassified. Now, that doesn't mean the connection isn't secure. I don't want to confuse those terms, but it's not for classified communications, which is, but the vast majority of government communication isn't secret, classified kind of information. So that's not a big deal. But interestingly, in that marketplace, they're currently the only UC platform that I saw that had achieved full approval. Microsoft Office 365 was pending. They were still in the process, as well as Cisco WebEx Teams was also in process, but they were not through the entire certification process. So it's interesting, but the devil's in the details as to what you actually achieved in that. And that's why even as integrators or end customers, we have to understand what those designations really mean, because it's very easy to say, I have a certification to a community and marketplace that don't understand that world and just think, oh, then they're okay. And like one could assume here, that means people are having classified meetings over Zoom, which we know they're not. So another instance there too is a point I want to bring up about the importance of getting that achievement is a reduction in friction for someone to buy your service, right? And so typically with most government programs, I have if someone that has to meet a standard and I can buy them, and if you're the only one that meets that standard, then you're the only one that I can technically buy. But if you don't meet the standard, there may be a waiver or approval process. I have to do a lot of admin work. I have to do a lot of approval waiver type things to where, is it worth the fight or do I just buy Zoom? You know what I'm saying? As a manufacturer, that's why it might be advantageous to have an early mover advantage and be the only one in a marketplace, because if no one's qualified, then everyone has to get a waiver because they still need the service. But if there's one that's qualified, that's where a floodgate can open, because now you're the only approved one. We all have to have it, and it's a lot easier for me to buy you than it is to get a waiver for the competition that I might prefer.
Interesting. Peter, same kind of question. How important are these or any sort of government or federal certifications?
Definitely important. I mean, it's definitely something that we've, as a manufacturer, we're continually making sure. I mean, it goes back with us in terms of history for sure, just in terms of, what it meant for our organization going back decades in terms of, making products that were up to mil spec, and not breaking in the field for World War II or whatever else. I mean, that was some of the biggest booms of what we brought to the marketplace were because of that. And then we just stuck with it. And that's why a lot of our stuff is built the way it is. But, moving into today's timeline, and these certifications are definitely, this was an interesting one, because I feel like, Zoom is pushing into a lot of, different verticals and different segments, and having this will obviously turn some heads among, competitors. And like Chris was saying, I mean, there are other ones that are waiting in the wings for that, for such approval. But it's definitely something that, we're always taking a look at and monitoring and making sure that we're compliant with, regulations that are necessary or certifications that we need to achieve. But yeah, it's definitely something that we're taking a look at.
Yeah. Don, a little bit of a different question here. The government in general, and I'm going to say the government in general, the Department of Defense is getting ready to approve and award a cloud based or a cloud contract. They're referring to it as JEDI, which I freaking love. But the two main competitors for that is Amazon AWS, which AVNation, that's what we use as S3, and Microsoft Azure, right? So it's taking a step back from just video, software-based video conferencing. The Department of Defense is going to the cloud, right? Something I never thought I would say. Something I have had folks like my buddy Joel Billheimer, who works in that space. He and I have had discussions about that for years now. They're going to the cloud. They're going to software-based codecs like this. Do moves like that by the government and government entities who have historically been incredibly security and not risk, but their risk for security is a very, very high, and so they research these things and make sure that they know what they're getting into before they step in. Are moves like that by the government, is it a mark of approval, or a stamp of approval on that technology in general for other organizations, companies, Fortune 500, to say, hey, you know what, the Department of Defense is going down that road, so it should be okay for us too?
Well, I think it's kind of a step in the right direction. I wouldn't call it just a seal of approval. You have companies like mine that work in that space but aren't the Department of Defense.
No.
And we see the Department of Defense making moves like that, and it's kind of like, okay, we might consider this now, but we still would have our own vetting process. We still would have our own concerns. The whole idea of cloud anything in this entire vertical, like you said, it just seems completely against the grain. But it's a sign of, hey, it's 2019. This is where the world is going. Interestingly enough, back to the dumb terminals and your data is elsewhere, sort of where computing came from, in a new fashion, though. And I think it's a sign of things to come. I think that your average Joe company, your maybe not banks, but like your lawyers or your widget makers and things like that, they would see the DoD approving something like that and say, yeah, okay, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. Like I said, some in the vertical, though, are still even more risk averse and even more concerned. That said, I was super excited to see this story about Zoom because, and even though they're now at the highest level of non-classified, it's a step in the right direction. As I said, it's proof that it is coming, that they will get there eventually, and because I don't see video conferencing going away. I just read something in Install magazine. It's a sister publication in Europe for SCN.
Yep.
That they were talking about collaboration technology recently. And a couple of quotes stuck out to me, one of them being that what they're calling USB rooms, or what we used to call huddle spaces, rooms without a traditional codec, are far and away the fastest growing segment of that fast growing market. And I see it here in my own organization. For every one hard codec we put in, there's dozens of rooms where they just want like a web-based USB camera and use the internal chat feature of, Skype for Business, groups, whatever soft codec is approved for use within your organization type thing. And when you get that so popular, and with the cost prohibitiveness, if that's a word, of the traditional codec system, it's really appealing that you can say, all right, for this entire site, we're going to put one codec in. They can handle the classified stuff or the important stuff, and everybody else is going to use this cloud-based. You get something like Zoom coming along and saying, hey, we're working on getting that certification. Suddenly, VTC rooms are much more affordable. Travel budgets go down considerably. Company can save thousands, if not millions of dollars. When I started to work here at Redacted, I was blown away by how much money we spend flying executives from point to point to point to talk to other executives, when a simple, what we're doing here would work just fine in a lot of cases. But because we have that requirement that you need a hard codec and certain classified versions of hard codecs before they can use that sort of service, and it's so cost prohibitive they don't have it at every site, you're still standing in line at the TSA, So the idea that Zoom has gotten this far and that the DoD is adopting these sorts of technologies thus far excites me immensely now working in this vertical, because it means that things are coming that will make life easier, that will make business more cost effective. And if they can prove and do it securely, going back to that other story, getting rid of the vulnerabilities and keeping it as risk averse as possible, it's going to possibly radically change how we do business in certain verticals, this one included. So I was very excited by this story. Go Zoom. We don't use you at all right now. We don't use any soft codecs right now for any kind of external use, but keep going down this road and you're on the shopping list.
All right, very good. That'll be a good place to start. Thank you all so much. Actually, we'll stick with Dawn. Dawn, how do people get a hold of you if they want to?
Well, you obviously can't find me at work unless you know where I work and who I work for. But you can always find me online here at AVNation.tv, the host of the AV Social Show. A new one just dropped today, I believe, for this month. And you can find me occasionally popping up on this show. And you, of course, can find me on the Twitterverse and elsewhere as at AVDawn. And unfortunately, you will not be able to find me at Infocom this year because my boss and my coworkers are going. I mean, I'm in charge of the whole kingdom while they're gone, but I will not be in Orlando. So hit me up on the Twitterverse. I'll be FOMOing really badly.
All right, very good. Mr. Backus, thank you, sir. How do people get a hold of you or Harmon?
You can find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter at AV Control Guy. Hope to see you guys at Infocom. I'll be at the AVNation Tweet Up. It's always a good event. If you've never been, highly, highly recommended. Don, we will absolutely miss you. I'm kind of crushed to learn that on this call that you're not going to be there, but we will have a great time. And so that's how you can reach me.
All right, very good. And Mr. Peter Herr from Shure, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. You can get me at PA Her on the Twitters, LinkedIn, of course, as well, and then Shure.com, and I'll be at Infocom, and I'll see you at the Tweet Up.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. For Tim Albright, don't follow me on the Twitters because at this point, I am absolutely shocked but giddy the fact that the Blues are still playing hockey. For anybody,
Great Game 7.
Oh my gosh, I had a heart attack. Good friend of ours, works for Atlas IED. Michael Peebler is a huge Dallas Stars fan, and I have to give incredible respect and props to their goalie, Bishop, who happens to be from St. Louis but plays for the Stars. But yes, incredible series. And now we have to face the Sharks. So
and Metallica.
And Metallica. So we'll have to see where we go for the next week. So, but go by the website if you would, please. An awful lot of people spend an awful lot of hard work on it. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others, including REDACTED and our Infocom 2019 coverage. While you're there, please check out our supporters section. These are the folks who help us financially and help us bring you AVWeek and REDACTED and all the others, and Shure is one of those, and we thank them for their support. Speaking of Infocom, Chris already mentioned the Tweet Up. Go by the website and register for that. It's sponsored by Starin and Infocom. It happens June 12th, which is the Wednesday from 4 to 6. Find out the room number. I believe it's on the 3rd floor of the OC. But it's 4 to 6. We call it a walkthrough party simply because we understand that there are hundreds of places you could be going to the week of Infocom. We're just, make us kind of your first drink of the night on Wednesday. Come by and trade business cards with folks and see a bunch of folks in real life. Our next webinar is May 22nd, actually kind of getting you ready for Infocom. We're going to be covering the specs and everything you need to know for AV over IP. So all that and more at avnation.tv. It's avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That's all the time we have for AV Week.